My name is Tanya Pierce. I'm 44 years old, and for a long time I believed love, after 40, was supposed to be calmer, mature, steady a harbor after years of storms. But if I had known how wrong I was, I might never have opened my door that night. When I met Richard, I wasn't looking for another relationship. I had built my own quiet rhythm as a freelance artist, coffee at sunrise, paint. On my hands by noon, long walks through the park before evening. Then came him gentle voice, steady eyes, a man who'd been through grief and still carried kindness in his pockets. Richard had lost his wife years ago. She'd passed away right after giving birth to their only son, Kyle. He'd raised the boy alone with a lot of help, or rather interference, from his mother, Pamela. Richard talked about them often, his voice soft with guilt and nostalgia. I listened, not realizing that these two people would soon turn my life into a quiet battlefield. The first time I met them was at a Sunday brunch. Pamela greeted me with the kind of smile that cuts too polite, too sharp. Her pearls gleamed like tiny warnings around her neck. Kyle, on the other hand, didn't bother with pretense. He looked me up and down, once smirked, and said, "So you're the woman replacing Mom?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Richard scolded him gently, but I could see he was used to this behavior, used to making excuses for his son. I tried to shrug it off. People lash out when they feel threatened, I told myself. Maybe I'd win them over with patience. Maybe love would fix it. For a while, I tried everything. I invited Kyle to dinner, made his favorite lasagna from a recipe Richard said his late wife used to make. He barely touched it. I offered to help him polish his resume for a new job. He never sent it. Pamela, meanwhile, would sit in the living room during her visits, running her fingers along the edge of our picture frames, leaving little traces of judgment behind. "She means well," Richard would sigh after she left. "Does she?" I'd whisper. "Because every time she smiles at me, I feel like I should apologize for existing." Still, I stayed kind. I thought consistency might soften them, but their dislike wasn't ordinary. It was rehearsed, as if they'd already decided who I was long before I walked into their lives. 3 months into our relationship, Richard and I bought a small, sunlit house together. My dream studio on one side, his study on the other. It was the first thing we truly built as partners. On the day we moved in, Pamela came over with a cake that said, "Congratulations, Richard." Not Tanya and Richard, just Richard. When I joked about it, she said, "Oh, don't be silly. Houses have always belonged to the family." The family, I asked. Yes, Richard, Kyle, and me. She didn't even blink when she said it. Kyle dropped by occasionally, always unannounced, always at dinner time. He'd sprawl on the couch and make comments about how Dad's finally settling down like an old man. One night he even laughed. "At least she's not after your money, right?" I didn't answer, but something in me hardened that night. One afternoon, while cleaning up the guest room, I overheard Pamela's voice drifting from the hallway. She was on the phone, speaking softly to Kyle. "Don't worry, darling," she said. "This won't last. That house will be yours again soon." I froze my hand, still gripping the pillowcase. Yours again soon. What did that mean? When Richard came home, I didn't tell him what I'd heard. Maybe I didn't want to believe it. Maybe part of me thought ignoring it would make it untrue. But that night, as I lay awake beside him watching the ceiling flicker in the dark, something inside whispered that I was standing in a home built on borrowed peace. And sooner or later, someone was going to try to take it away. When I look back now, I can see the warning signs everywhere. The small slights, the whispered phone calls, the tension that thickened whenever Pamela and Kyle stepped into our home. But back then, I was still trying to keep peace. I believed that if I showed them kindness long enough, they'd eventually see me as family. So I kept trying. Every Friday, I'd cook dinner for all of us, something warm, familiar. Richard would pour wine. Pamela would comment on how different my cooking style was, and Kyle would sit there silent, scrolling through his phone until he found a reason to mock whatever I said. One night, I decided to ask him about work. "So, Kyle, how's the new job going?" He didn't look up. "You mean the one I had before Dad decided to cut off my allowance?" Pamela's fork clinked against her plate. "Richard, you didn't tell me that." Richard sighed. "He's 26, Mom. It's time he learned how to manage on his own." Kyle finally looked up, his eyes sharp and cold. "Manage on my own." "You mean like Tanya jumping from one gig to another, pretending to be some kind of artist?" The room fell silent. I could feel Pamela's satisfaction, like she'd been waiting for him to say it. Richard slammed his fork down. "That's enough." Kyle laughed bitterly. What I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. She's half your age and twice as broke. Stop! Richard's voice cracked through the air. She's not half my age, and she earns her living honestly. More honestly than you ever have. Pamela gasped. Richard. But he didn't back down. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw anger, not the gentle kind, but the kind that comes from years of swallowing silence. Kyle stood his chair, scraping hard against the floor. You've lost it, Dad. You're letting her ruin everything Mom built. And then he stormed out. Pamela followed, muttering something about how I'd bewitched her son. The door slammed, leaving the smell of burnt tension behind. That night, Richard sat in the dark living room for a long time, hands clasped, eyes hollow. I'm sorry, I whispered. He shook his head. Don't ever apologize for their cruelty. I should have stopped it sooner. After that night, Richard decided to distance himself. He stopped answering Pamela's calls, stopped visiting. He even told Kyle to give him space until he learned to respect our boundaries. For a while, it felt like breathing again. The house was quiet, peaceful. But guilt has a way of creeping into the corners. I knew Richard missed his family even if he didn't say it. I'd sometimes find him scrolling through old photos, Kyle as a baby in his arms, Pamela smiling in the background. You can call them if you want, I'd tell him gently. I don't want to be the reason you lose your family. He'd just smile sadly. I already lost them long before you came, Tanya. Months passed like that. Work filled my days, laughter returned to our evenings. We even started making plans to travel to finally live without drama trailing behind us. Then one Tuesday morning, the phone rang. It was Pamela. Her voice was trembling but purposeful. Tanya, I'm not calling to fight, she said. Kyle. He's been going through something. His marriage ended. He has nowhere to go. He wants to make amends. For a moment, I said nothing. I could almost hear the faint echo of her earlier words in my head. That house will be yours again soon. Pamela, I said slowly, what exactly are you asking? She hesitated. Just let him stay with you for a while. You have the space. He'll behave. I looked at the house around me, our quiet, hard-earned peace, and felt a chill crawl up my spine. Because deep down I knew this wasn't about family. It was about invasion. And something told me that if we opened that door again, we might never close it the same way. Richard couldn't hide the ache in his eyes when he heard about Kyle's divorce. I watched him as Pamela's words sank in his shoulders, tensing his voice, dropping to that quiet tone he always used when guilt crept back into him. He's still my son, he said softly that night. I can't just turn my back on him when he's at his lowest. I wanted to argue. Every memory I had of Kyle screamed, don't let him back in. But then I saw the pain on Richard's face, the kind only a parent can carry, and I bit my tongue. Maybe I finally said we can just meet him first, see what he wants. A week later, Pamela invited us to her house for a family talk. The smell of her lavender perfume hit me before the door even opened. Inside, Kyle sat on the couch, head bowed, his hands twisting nervously. He looked smaller than I remembered. Tanya, he said quietly, I was awful to you. I see that now. I just want to fix things. His eyes were glassy, his voice trembling just enough to sound believable. I wanted to believe him. Maybe people really did grow up when life humbled them. Pamela sniffled dramatically. He's been through so much. The divorce nearly broke him. Richard reached forward and squeezed Kyle's shoulder. We all make mistakes, son. What matters is learning from them. I sat there watching the two of them, a strange mix of pity and wariness in my chest. Because beneath Kyle's guilt, I saw something else flicker, something calculating. A quiet confidence that didn't belong to someone broken. Still, I agreed when Richard suggested inviting him over for dinner the next weekend. Let's just give him a chance, he'd said, his voice warm with hope. And so we did. Kyle came over often after that. He brought wine flowers, even helped me hang new curtains. He complimented my paintings, asked questions about my work. I almost laughed the first time he called me Tanya instead of her. For a few weeks, I allowed myself to believe he was changing. Then, one evening, while I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, he appeared at the counter with a neatly folded stack of papers in his hand. Hey, he said casually. Before I move in next week, I need you and Dad to sign these. I blinked. Move in. He smiled. Yeah. Pamela said it'd be fine. I'll stay here until I'm back on my feet. Don't worry, it's temporary. He slid the papers across the counter, legal documents typed, stamped, and signed by an attorney. Wait, I said, slowly skimming the words. This says you'd have partial ownership of the house. 50%, he corrected. Just for legal security. I don't want to get kicked out again like I did at my ex place. It's just a formality. My throat tightened. Kyle, you didn't pay for this house. Not a cent. He shrugged. It's still Dad's name on the title, isn't it? I'm just protecting what's ours. The room felt colder then. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Ours, I repeated. He nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. Family property. You wouldn't understand, Tanya. You're not blood. That word blood cut through me like glass. Richard walked in just as I was staring down at the papers. What's going on? He asked. Kyle grinned faintly. Just sorting out some paperwork so we're all protected. Richard took the pages, his brow furrowing. I saw the confusion turn to disbelief, then anger. Kyle, he said quietly, this isn't protection. This is theft. Kyle's smile faltered. You're overreacting, Dad. It's manipulation, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. And you knew exactly what you were doing. Pamela must have been waiting for that call because within minutes she rang Richard, her voice high and indignant. You're misunderstanding him, Richard. He's just scared. The poor boy lost everything. No, Mom, Richard snapped. He's trying to take what isn't his. When he hung up, the silence that followed was suffocating. I stared at Kyle, my heart hammering, my patience gone. You said you wanted to fix things. But the truth is, you came here to claim what you think belongs to you. Kyle looked down, his expression hardening. I trust Dad, he said quietly. I just don't trust you. That was it. The calm inside me shattered. I folded the papers, placed them back in his hand, and said, Then you can take these and your trust and walk out the same door you came through. I stepped aside and opened it for him. He didn't move at first. His jaw tightened, his eyes flicked toward Richard as if expecting him to intervene. But Richard didn't say a word. When Kyle finally stormed out, I closed the door with a finality that shook the walls. It wasn't just the end of a visit, it was the end of pretending. And as the echo of that slam faded through the house, I realized peace doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from saying enough. The night after I closed the door on Kyle, the silence in the house felt strange, almost too quiet, like the calm before a storm that knows exactly where to find you. Richard sat on the couch, staring at nothing, his hands clasped together like he was holding onto something invisible. Guilt, maybe. Did I do the right thing? I asked, sitting beside him. He didn't answer right away. His thumb rubbed the edge of his wedding band, that old habit he still hadn't let go of. I don't know, he said finally, but I think you did what I couldn't. It was the first time I realized how much he'd been carrying, years of letting Kyle and Pamela walk all over his boundaries, years of mistaking compliance for love. We didn't talk much after that. He poured himself a glass of wine and sat there long after I went to bed. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You should be ashamed. That boy is heartbroken. Another message followed. Family doesn't slam doors, Tanya. Then came more texts from distant relatives, acquaintances I barely knew. Each one some variation of how could you? He's just a child, you're tearing them apart. I scrolled through them until my chest felt tight. He's 26, I whispered. 26. Richard saw the messages later and tried to take my phone away. Block them, he said. All of them. I can handle it. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said softly, You shouldn't have to. So we blocked them all. Every number, every reminder that in their eyes I would always be the outsider, the woman who came between blood. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. I knew before I even looked through the peephole. Pamela stood there wrapped in her usual beige coat, face twisted into something that wasn't quite anger, but wasn't forgiveness either. Where's Richard? She demanded. At work, I said flatly. Good. Then maybe you'll listen for once. She stepped forward, but I didn't move aside. Her perfume filled the doorway, sickly sweet, invasive. Kyle hasn't eaten properly in 3 days, she said. He's devastated. You've humiliated him. Pamela, I said calmly. He tried to trick us into giving him half our home. He's scared, she shot back. His marriage collapsed, he lost his stability, and now you're shutting him out when he needs family most. I folded my arms. He doesn't need family. He needs consequences. Her eyes narrowed. You've poisoned Richard against us. That boy worshipped his father until you came along. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not violently, just cleanly. Do you even hear yourself? I asked quietly. You raised him to believe love means control. That's why he treats everyone like property. That's not worship, Pamela. That's ownership. For a moment, she looked genuinely stunned. Then her lips trembled and she hissed, You'll regret this. She turned sharply and walked away, her heels clacking down the steps like an accusation. That night, when Richard came home, I told him everything. He didn't say much, just wrapped his arms around me and whispered, I'm done protecting people who hurt you. But as he held me, I noticed the faint light blinking on his phone, a new message from an unknown number. It was short. You'll regret crossing family. Richard exhaled through his nose, deleted it, and muttered, "Let them try." I wanted to believe him. But as I turned off the lights and glanced out the window, I caught a flicker of movement near the driveway. A shadow, a car idling just beyond the fence. And in that moment, I knew the storm I thought I'd shut out hadn't left. It was circling, waiting for the right night to come knocking again. It happened 3 weeks later on a Thursday that began like any other. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, and Richard had gone to the hardware store while I worked in my studio upstairs. By evening, the storm finally broke low, thunder rolling across the sky, a warning that came too late. When I came downstairs, the first thing I noticed was the front door open. The second was the sound of voices sharp and trembling. Pamela's, Kyle's, and Richard's. I froze in the hallway just out of sight. "I thought you wanted to fix things," Richard was saying, his voice low, steadying itself. "We do," Pamela answered quickly, her tone falsely sweet. "But first you have to acknowledge what she's done." "She," Richard asked. "Tanya," Kyle said. His voice cracked between anger and humiliation. "She turned you against us. She made you throw me out." I stepped forward then into the room. "No, Kyle. You threw yourself out the moment you brought those papers." His head snapped toward me. "You don't get to talk about family business." Richard stood between us. "This is my house," he said firmly, "and she has every right to speak here." Pamela's eyes were wet, but her expression was anything but broken. "Richard," she began, "this isn't you. You were never cruel. You were a good son, a loving father. Now you're just cold." "I'm tired," he said. "Tired of being made to feel guilty for choosing peace." Kyle stepped forward. "Peace," he laughed bitterly. "You call this peace? You're living with someone who hates your own blood." "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "I just refuse to be manipulated anymore." He glared at me, shaking his head. "You wouldn't understand what it's like to lose everything. You think you can walk into our lives and replace Mom?" That word replace hung in the air like smoke. Richard's face tightened and his voice dropped to a whisper. "No one replaced her, Kyle. But I had to keep living. You should have understood that by now." Pamela clutched her pearls dramatically. "You see, that woman made you heartless." Richard turned on her, then years of silence snapping all at once. "No, Mother, you did." Pamela's lips parted, but no sound came. "I've spent my whole life trying to keep you both happy," he said. "I blamed myself for everything, Kyle's attitude, your bitterness. I thought if I just kept the peace long enough, maybe one day you'd stop resenting everyone around you. But I see now you don't want peace. You want control." "Don't talk to your mother like that," Pamela whispered, her face pale. Richard's voice shook, but he didn't stop. "You raised him to believe love means ownership. You made him think it's fine to take what he wants because the world will always forgive him. Well, I won't." Kyle's voice cracked. "You're ashamed of me." Richard looked at him with a sadness that was almost unbearable. "Yes," he said, "I am." Pamela gasped. "How dare you? How dare you?" He shot back. "Stand there and blame Tanya for the wreckage you caused. You wanted him to have everything without earning a thing. Congratulations, you succeeded. You raised a man who knows how to take, but not how to love." The thunder outside rumbled as if echoing his words. Kyle's eyes were glassy, but there was fury behind them too, a boy trapped inside a man's body, furious that the world no longer bent for him. Pamela grabbed his arm. "Come on, Kyle, we're leaving." They stormed toward the door, but before stepping out, Pamela turned one last time. "One day, Richard, you'll regret choosing her over your own blood." Richard's reply was soft but final. "I didn't choose her over you. I chose peace over chaos." The door closed behind them with a dull thud. When I stepped closer, Richard was still staring at it, his chest rising and falling like he'd just run miles. "They're gone," I whispered. He nodded slowly. Then he looked at me, eyes wet but calm. "It's strange," he said. "For the first time in years, I actually feel free." I touched his hand. "Freedom always costs something, Richard." He smiled faintly. Then this was worth every bit of the price. Outside, the rain began to ease. The air smelled clean again, like the storm had taken something ugly with it when it passed. I thought that was the end of it. But the truth is, peace doesn't come when people leave your door. It comes when their shadows finally stop reaching for you. And I had a feeling those shadows weren't done yet. A full year has passed since that night. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes like another lifetime that doesn't quite belong to me anymore. The house is quiet now, the kind of quiet that hums with safety, not dread. Richard and I still live here in the same sunlit home that once felt like a battlefield, but now it smells like freshly brewed coffee and dog treats instead of tension and lavender perfume. Because, yes, there's a new heartbeat in this house now. His name is Milo, a 3-year-old golden retriever we adopted from a rescue shelter 6 months ago. Richard swore we were just going to look. I knew better the second that dog laid his head in Richard's lap. Milo follows me everywhere from my art studio to the garden, where he insists on chasing butterflies instead of behaving. Sometimes when the sunlight hits the living room just right, and I see Richard laughing as Milo jumps onto the couch he swore was off limits, I think maybe this is what peace was always meant to look like. It didn't happen overnight, though. After the confrontation, Pamela and Kyle disappeared from our lives almost completely. We heard through a neighbor that Pamela sold her house and moved to live with a distant relative. Kyle apparently drifted from job to job, always blaming someone else for his failures. They didn't call, didn't write, and for a while that silence felt heavier than their presence ever did. Richard struggled the most. He'd never admit it, but I'd catch him sometimes sitting at the dining table scrolling through his phone as if waiting for a message that never came. Once I found him staring out the window late at night, his wine untouched. "Do you think he'll ever forgive me?" he asked softly. "Maybe," I said, "when he learns what forgiveness really means." He nodded, but his eyes stayed on the rain outside. "You know, I used to dream about hearing the front door open and seeing him walk in, ready to start over." I touched his arm gently. "If that ever happens, it should be because he wants peace, not because we feel guilty for finding it." He smiled, then weary but genuine. "You're right. You always are." Months passed, and life began to settle into something beautiful again. I painted more than ever. Richard started volunteering at the local community center, teaching woodworking to teenagers who reminded him of the version of Kyle he wished he'd raised. It was healing, slow, quiet, real. Then one afternoon, a friend of mine from town sent me a message. "Tanya, did you see Kyle's post?" I didn't even follow him anymore, but curiosity got the better of me. She sent a screenshot. It was a short post on his social media. Funny how some people replace family so easily. Guess a dog listens better than a son. I stared at it for a long time before laughing softly. "He's jealous of a dog," I said. Richard chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, Milo doesn't try to take half the house, so maybe he's got a point." For the first time, laughter didn't feel like defiance. It felt like release. I posted a new painting online that night. It was simple, a front door, slightly ajar, warm light spilling out, rain fading in the background. I titled it, "Peace Can't Be Shared," because that's what I've learned. Peace isn't something you divide to keep others happy. It's something you protect even when people call you heartless for doing it. When I wake up each morning now, the house feels lighter. The ghosts of their voices have faded into echoes I no longer hear. Richard and I sit on the porch with our coffee while Milo sprawls at our feet. The sun rises slow and gold over the garden, and Richard squeezes my hand gently. "We did it," he says. "We really made it through." I look at him, at the man who chose peace over chaos, love over guilt, and I smile. "They wanted half our house," I whisper, "but they never realized something." He raises an eyebrow. "What's that?" I watch Milo chase a butterfly across the yard and feel the kind of quiet joy that only comes after surviving a storm. "You can't steal peace," I say softly. You either build it, or you destroy yourself trying to take it." The wind stirs, carrying the scent of rain away for good. And for the first time in a long time, I know this home finally belongs to us.